Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe the Second Amendment is a fundamental right. I support it, and I support it in a way that does not send our constituents and our troopers to the federal penitentiary. And that's the problem with this bill, Mr. Speaker. I've distributed two memos from Legislative Legal, one dated January 30th and one dated February 19th. And I'll direct you to page 3, section 5 of the bill, going on to page 4. Those are where the problems of the bill exist. I think it is fully proper for us to stand up for the citizens' right to bear arms. I think it's fully proper for us to stand up for the Second Amendment. But I do not think it is right for us to tell constituents that it's okay to commit a federal crime only to have them suffer the consequences of our actions. The January 30th memo says that the bill saying it's okay to commit a federal crime is unenforceable, and we know that. When the federal government passes a federal crime, the state can't tell its constituents it's okay to go ahead and violate that federal criminal law. It's a basic premise of the constitutional system we set up in this country, and it's wrong for us to jeopardize the freedom and the liberty of our citizens by telling them it's okay to commit a federal crime that they're not allowed to commit. There's the February 19th memo that discusses some of the sentences that our citizens and our troopers might suffer in federal jail, behind bars, if they read this bill and think this bill is giving them proper advice, which it isn't. Section 5 of the bill says that certain firearm laws adopted by this or a future Congress, criminal laws, are unenforceable. Well, that's not true. Federal criminal laws that Congress adopts are very likely enforceable. That's what Legislative Legal says. So it tells our citizens to go ahead, violate those federal statutes, and when they do that, on our advice, they'll end up in jail. The February 19th memo gives you a couple of examples of the jail time that our constituents will suffer if this bill is passed. One of the concerns of this bill is the federal government might try and regulate assault weapons. And I'll be the first person to agree the term assault weapon is very difficult to define. That's a problem that many people across the country have with the discussion about how you define an assault weapon. So I agree with that debate. We once had an assault weapons ban in the state, Mr. Speaker, and that's on page 1 of the February 19th memo. That assault weapons ban said that if you owned an assault weapon, you were subject to up to 5 years of imprisonment. I'm not saying I agree with that law, but that was the law. Then that ban expired, and you can expect the new assault weapons ban will be somewhat similar and may very well include a similar 5-year jail sentence. So if that's what our constituents do, take our advice that it's okay to violate a future assault weapons ban, we're telling our constituents to do something that might get them 5 years in federal prison. I'm not comfortable telling my constituents to go ahead and do something that'll land them in jail just because I don't like the way the federal government regulates things. If you flip over to subsection G on page 4 of the bill, it says something even more troubling, or just as troubling. And that's that an official agent of the federal government that enforces a federal criminal law, that does their job, an FBI agent, it says an FBI agent can go to jail in Alaska for enforcing a federal crime. That sounds interesting, but let's figure out what this does. Number one, it violates a federal criminal statute. If you look at page 1 of the February 19th memo that Legislative Legal drafted for us, it's a crime to impede an action by a federal officer enforcing federal law. It's a crime to impede them. Section G says it's a crime for an FBI agent to arrest somebody for violating a federal criminal law. Well, in order for that to be a crime, that means somebody has to arrest them. That means a trooper has to arrest them, or a police officer has to arrest them. And when a police officer or a trooper arrest an FBI agent, they have done what federal law calls impeding a federal officer from doing their job. So they'll be subject to a criminal penalty of somewhere between 1 year if no scuffle happens, up to 20 years if a major scuffle happens. So those are the two provisions of the bill, Mr. Speaker, that I've got a problem with. It's one thing, and I'll stand with you to say the federal government has no right to trample on our Second Amendment rights and violate the Constitution. But I'm not going to tell my constituents that it's okay for them to do something that's a federal crime. And I'm not going to tell my troopers that it's okay for them to do something that constitutes a federal crime. And that's what those two sections of this bill say. There are better ways to express your dissatisfaction with what the federal government does, by resolution perhaps, by letter, by electing congressional representatives who'll stand up for the things that we believe in. But it is not right to make our constituents think that illegal conduct is okay, to make our constituents think they can do things that are going to land them in the federal clink, only to have them, when they're in federal jail, write us and say, I thought you said we could do this. I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to deprive my constituents of their liberty. I'm not willing to deprive my constituents of their freedom. I'm not willing to deprive my constituents of their time with their family and their children at home. So, Mr. Speaker, I understand the desire to sort of stand up to the federal government and say this is the way we see things, but I can't support a bill that tells our constituents it's okay to commit a federal crime when it's not okay to commit a federal crime. So I will be voting against this bill, Mr. Speaker. I've distributed the memo so folks can see what crimes this bill subjects our constituents and our troopers to, and the earlier memo to show that just saying that you can go ahead and violate federal criminal laws, well, that's unenforceable. That's in paragraph 1 of the memo. I just don't want to jeopardize my constituents' freedom and liberty like that. Thank you.